Hi, I'm Tricia Morris from Club Scrap, and welcome to the Constellations Lite Club Scrap Assembly Workshop. Print your instructions, get your kit, gather your supplies, and let's get started. All right, here is a printout of the instructions that are always provided. You don't necessarily have to print them. You can use them on a computer screen or a tablet while you work. But one of the first things that we have listed on the instructions for every collection that we create at Club Scrap is the preparation, which is, in this case, to separate the sheets of cut-aparts into individual art elements. Now, when I'm working with a group of beginners, I usually have them do this step last, and that way they've had a lot of opportunity to work with the guillotine trimmer, which I always recommend for our style of scrapbooking. This is our Fiskars guillotine trimmer, and it works wonderfully for our process here. I'm going to take the black sheet of printed cut-aparts, and whenever I insert something into the trimmer, I always want to remove the narrowest elements first. And we usually have those art elements trimmed at the nearest whole number or nearest quarter inch. So this first cut to remove this element here will occur at 11 inches, and we'll make a 1-inch strip. Then I'll slide it down, and I can actually see tiny little hash marks on this print that indicate where it gets trimmed. So I try to align those hash marks along the edge of that steel blade as I go. And then I slide down. Always be careful to make sure you're not trimming through artwork. So right now I need to actually rotate my piece of paper so that I don't cut through the middle of this piece here. And just continue on until all of the elements have been separated. All right, then we have the sheet of matte gloss white printed cut-aparts. These are alterable. You can color them with markers or inks or whatever, or just leave them as is in the case of the way I use them. And once again, I'm removing the most narrow strips first, and I'm always checking along the edge of the steel blade as I'm trimming to make sure that I have everything lined up properly. And just go ahead and finish this one in the same way you did the black and silver sheet. Now you'll have a stack of papers here, so we're going to trim all of the papers required to create our layouts, and for that I'm consulting page 2 of our instructions. Along the bottom I have diagrams, but if you basically follow the written words of the instructions, you'll do just fine in preparing your papers for distribution on your layouts. So starting with the burgundy plain, this has a really nice linen texture. I'll put it into the trimmer. I'm going to make several cuts all at once here, going in the same direction. So we'll start at 11, then slide it down to 10. And once again, we're making the smallest pieces first. Next one, 8 3/4. Now, if you're new at this, what I usually do is recommend you find 8 and then scoot to the left 3 vertical lines to find 8 3/4. Next is 7 1/2. So again, 7, 7 1/4, 7 1/2. And the last one in this direction is at 5 1/4. And then typically this piece, if it needs to be trimmed, it will come next in the instructions. So take this piece and rotate it horizontally, and we'll trim at 8 4. Now if I'm going too fast, just simply pause me and you can catch up by either repeating or rewinding if you need to. Now there's another strip here. If you look at the papers that have all fallen off to the side, there are several really narrow strips and then one slightly wider strip. It's that wide strip that we'll trim horizontally a whole bunch of times. First one is at 11 1/4. That's going to make a tiny little scrap, and this piece is not used. You could find a way to use it, I'm sure. Okay, the next one, after 11 1/4, we'll go down to 9, 6 3/4, 4 1/2, and 2 1/4. What we did when we made all those cuts is we made a whole bunch of little squares, all the same size. All right, that's it for the burgundy. Next sheet we trim will be the pearl plain, and these tend to stick together and have a little bit of static electricity, especially in the dry, cold winters of Wisconsin. So look through your stack carefully if you can't find it. I'm going to make 2 cuts here. The first one is at 10 3/4, and the next one is at 6. Take this piece, rotate it, and trim horizontally at 8 and 4. We just made here our 3 photo mats, a wide strip and a narrow strip. We'll set all that aside, and the next piece we'll take is this beautiful coated sheet of metallic matte silver paper. It's white on one side and it's a really cool coated matte finish on the other. So let's trim this at 2 1/2. It's very heavy paper, so just be aware of that, and then rotate this 2 1/2 by 12 and trim at 10. 7 1/2, 5, and 2 1/2. And once again, we've just made a whole bunch of squares. Then we'll take our other wider piece. We got a couple more cuts to make on this one. The first one will be at, you have to find it here in my instructions, 10 1/2, and then 7, 3 1/2. 10 1/2, 7, 3 1/2. We just made 3 squares, and we have this little guy, and believe it or not, we're going to trim him horizontally at 3. Why not use this beautiful stuff? And 1 1/2. And from this, we will have a teeny tiny little piece, and that is actually a scrap. You can set that aside. Okay. I'm turning now to page 3 of my instructions, and we'll have one more piece that we need to trim here, and then back 2 pages later, just 1 additional piece. For this one, we're going to need a craft knife and cutting mat. All right, now the next piece that we trim is going to be the 12 by 12 white print. It's a 4-color print, and what I wanted to work with here was that angular style of the print, which I absolutely love. And so I'm going to take a club scrap grid ruler and a nice sharp craft knife. I'm using the club scrap craft knife. I don't know if you're aware that we have one. Love this. It's a nice sharp blade, especially when it's brand new, and it has a hexagon bolt on the top that prevents it from rolling onto the floor to do terrible things. So you'll actually place your ruler right in between the angular vertical line that we have going on the artwork. We'll just work with the art here. I'll put firm downward pressure with my non-dominant hand on the ruler, and then take the craft knife, bring it toward me as I trim this apart into 2 separate art elements. Now, why didn't I use my trimmer? Well, frankly, I just couldn't fit it in there, so that's when I had to turn to the craft knife and cutting mat. And that's it for that print. Next, let's go back to our trimmer and our last piece of paper to be trimmed, which the instructions will be on page 5, and this is just a single cut. I'm going to place that pearl plain metallic in there, or it's pearlescent, at 7 inches. And that is all the trimming you need to do for this entire set of 8 layouts. Okay, so what we're going to do now is a little crazy, but it's a really great way to prevent errors from happening, or at least perceived errors. We're going to start out with layout number 8, which would be on page 5 of your instructions, and even if it helps you to fold the paper in half and say we're doing the right side of this double page spread. So we're doing layout number 8, and then once this page is completed and all the elements for that page are placed on top of its base, then we'll stack layout 7 on top of that. And in that process, we'll find all of the elements we need for each individual layout, and if something gets misplaced in the process, we can dig back and find out what went wrong before everything is glued down in place. So starting with 8, we'll take our 12 by 12 metallic black print. Absolutely love this print. And I'm doing the classic, what I call the 5/7 split. So I'm taking a 7-inch piece of that pearl translucent and placing it along the left edge. It would be your left, yes, of this print. Then I'll subdivide the color space with a narrow burgundy strip, and then this little piece will be nested on top of that. Now we have this zone over here that I can add elements to. So let's start with 2 white photo mats, and then we'll add one of our journaling cut aparts, and look, if I just tuck it right underneath this photo, it fits perfectly. And then for the right zone of this, I'm going to take one of those smaller burgundy photo mats and then take some of this gray variegated ribbon and just tie a bow around it, completely around. I won't do it right now just to save a little bit of time. Now, one of the other things I added next to this border strip is a length of this sparkle tape, the silver sparkle tape we've included. It's like washi tape, except even better. So just for place marking, I will snip off a 14-inch length of the tape. And once you remove the backing, it has a self-adhesive back, and we'll be able to attach that to the page, and it really makes a beautiful addition. Now to look at the finished layout, we'll grab that for you and show you how it all comes together. Here we've got our sparkle tape and our ribbon wrapped around the mat. You've got plenty of ribbon to go around, and all the other elements are in place, and now it's simply ready for my photos. A quick tip, on the instruction sheet, it tells you what size photo needs to go into each spot. Now let's move on to layout number 7. We'll take our second sheet of this gorgeous 12 by 12 black print, and then the remaining 5-inch piece of that pearl piece, and we're going to anchor this onto the page with these. Oh, I see I made an error. I had the wrong border on the other page, and this is why we stack, my friends. This is why we stack. This page gets the wider border. And not that it's necessarily wrong, but I'm going to fix it because I can, because nothing's stuck down. So we'll flank this strip, bottom and top, with these pretty little borders. And then we should have an area that's wide enough to accommodate one white photo mat. And then we'll equally space 3 of these pretty matte metallic silver squares at the bottom. When I attach my squares, I use my grid ruler, and I use the 0 center, and I can keep them nice and level and evenly spaced across the bottom of my page. The one final element is a cut apart right here, Love You to the Moon and Back, to round out a nice title for this layout using your cut aparts. Before we move on to layout 5 and 6, I realized I never showed you the finished layout 7. I wanted to point out a few small details. In the Club Scrap Deluxe kit, members received this sheet of Dazzle stickers. And honestly, on the backing, they don't look like much, but when you attach them to a page, I think they look fantastic. And the best part about it is they don't add a lot of bulk and weight. So if you just to attach them, I just take the tip of a craft knife and slide it onto my layout, and you're done. And I just did almost all the stars on this. I had a good time with it. I also took a very, very small piece of that silver sparkle tape, cut a little chevron into it, and attached it behind this cut apart. So those are little details you can add if you have things in your stash. By all means, incorporate them into your finished pages. Now for layout number 6, our base is going to be the piece of the burgundy paper that we did not trim apart. And then we have our conveniently cut photo mats, and of course these are 4 1/4 by 6 1/4, so they easily accommodate your 4 by 6 photos. We'll flank that on the right with a nice nested border strip. We've got a pearl, and then we'll nest our black metallic cut apart on top of that. And then to the right of it, another one of those lengths of that silver sparkle tape. And every page could use a little spot for journaling. Our journaling cards have an indicated top area that's a little bit larger space than on the bottom, and I've once again wrapped it with ribbon. Let's take a look at the finished layout here. Pretty basic, but the left side to me is absolutely gorgeous. This is the other untrimmed piece of that 12 by 12 white print, and I'm creating some anchoring here with a nested border strip, the burgundy and then the black cut apart. And we'll add our title, Things Are Looking Up, from our cut aparts, and then our 2 burgundy photo mats that we trimmed a little earlier will go there. This is all about spacing, so what's nice about not having anything adhered is that you can play around with it until you get things lined up exactly as you want. What I love about this is that everything has equal spacing all around each element. Then the final thing that I did here in the finished layout, I'll show you. In your light kit, you received a little package of star-shaped brads. These are wonderful for this set. And I used a paper piercing tool and a cork board to pierce holes into the border strips right on through to the back. And then I opened them up and put them in place here on my title bar of this layout. It's a great effect. Next up is layout number 3 and 4. The base of layout 4 actually then is the gray plane, and then I'm using the narrower portion of that piece that we trimmed at an angle that will be flush with the right edge of the layout. And then you can take a length of the silver sparkle tape and place it in between the seam in between the white print and the gray base. It's a nice effect there. I'll take that away for now. I like nesting things, so I have a black pre-cut photo mat, and then on top of that you can place one of the pearl pieces that you trimmed to 4x6 a little bit earlier. Now if the pieces of pearl and black that you have are the same exact size, you can swap out the ones from your other layout with the smaller 4x6 ones for this particular page. Then we have a cut apart that you can use for journaling, and also some additional black cut aparts to kind of accent things across the bottom. Now you can leave these just as art elements. You can put things on top of them, put photos on top, however you like to finish out your page. And then for the other side, and then I'll at the end go back and show you the completed pair, we'll use the larger portion on the left edge of the page. Same trick with the sparkle tape, separating the seams. And then this time I worked with the angle of the artwork, and when I placed my photo mat onto the piece, I did so at that same exact angle. So I'm referencing this for the placement of my photo mats. And a little title that of course comes from the cut aparts. I really like how that turned out. Let's take a look at the finished ones. Here is the left side. Because a photo is going to go here, it doesn't really matter what type of adhesive you use. You'll be covering it with the photograph. I did use a special vellum type adhesive for translucent papers, but to me there really is no paper that you can use that doesn't show, or no adhesive that doesn't show where you've placed it. Also, I added a little star-shaped brad to the period from the Make-A-Wish title that I got from the cut apart. And then that leaves us now with layouts number 1 and 2. The base for layout 2 is one of the only 2 remaining base papers, which is this deep dark blue. And then I'm adding some anchoring here with one of the remaining strips of the pearl plain. I believe it's 4 3/4 of an inch wide. And then a vertical 4x6 burgundy pre-cut photo mat. Now what I love about what happened with some of the cut aparts here is that I was able to nest them together with all those little squares we made. So here is a nested cut apart. Now again, you can go and add a photo to this or just leave the artwork, and next to it I'm adding one of those little matte metallic silver pieces. Then down in the bottom, to kind of even things out, we have some script and the other square. And you don't have to add anything to that if you don't want, or you could add maybe a star-shaped punch. I don't know, something fun. Then along the right edge here, we'll add a nested border strip here. So it's a white cut apart and a black cut apart. And now, thankfully, nothing is adhered because I want to scoot everything over slightly, so I have room for my cut apart, which I will then wrap with a little bit of this ribbon. There's 2 full yards of it, so there's plenty to go around. And then there's one of this matte metallic that's taller and skinnier, and the width actually happens to match the height of this journaling box. So now I have everything kind of laid out, and I'll show you the finished page. I took some additional star-shaped brads, and I used my grid ruler to evenly space them. They're 1 inch apart on this strip. And once again, put them right through to the back of the layout. Now let's finish up with layout 1. And what's cool about this is it's pretty much everything else that you have, starting with our evenly spaced, using my ruler again to keep everything aligned and evenly separated. Cleverly, the burgundy squares go on next, and then doesn't really matter which, your artwork pieces will go on next. So that's a lot of really nice nesting and layering there. And then separating that section with a nested cut apart. And you can just wrap the whole works with a length of this. So trim it to about 14 inches long, tape one end to the back, and then I usually tie the ribbon onto it and then tape the other end to the back so that I don't have to use ribbon going all the way around the paper. And then some angled pre-cut photo mats. Do I have those the right way? It's hard to tell upside down. And then finally finishing off the bottom with this nice little title strip. Now, what do I have left? I have one white 1-inch cut apart and these two tiny little scraps and 8 beautiful pages. I hope you've had fun putting together our 8 Club Scrap Lite Constellations layouts together. And I hope you consider joining Club Scrap Lite in the future if you haven't already. Just $19.95 a month gets you all of these great supplies, original to Club Scrap, delivered to your door, along with the instructions and all the help we provide. We'll see you next time.